Alright, so, the teaser for Marvel's Shang-Chi just dropped some time ago, and I can't lie, I'm kind of interested. And apparently so is a lot of people. It's been trending for several days and garnered millions of views and comments are all excited and whatnot. However, I can't help but think that it makes little sense from a conventional perspective. I mean, why Shang-Chi? Why all the hype? Who is this guy?
Who are you?
Good question. I don't know. I never heard of him. My point is, a movie about Shang-Chi being made makes no sense for the usual reasons Hollywood does a movie. And the hype surrounding it is also highly unusual. I mean, aside from pandering to China, but we'll talk about that later. In my 20 years of reading comics, I hardly remember this character. Granted, I was a DC kid because I was dark and edgy, but I'm pretty sure Shang-Chi is barely a C-lister in the Marvel universe, so this bajillion-dollar movie ain't being done for the financially irrelevant fans, or even the comic readers at all, since no one is buying Western comics these days, because no one wants to read about whatever this is. A teenage Burning Man party? I don't know, seems kind of inappropriate, but whatever. Look, I know he has his fans, but Hollywood rarely cares about the fans. Shang-Chi is extremely unusual in the Marvel lineup. Iron Man, Captain America, even Ant-Man, all these characters have had several decades of prominence in the mainstream. It's extremely unlike Hollywood to do a movie about a niche character like this born from the kung fu craze in the American 70s. And I know that he was based off of Bruce Lee, who wasn't exactly niche, but comic book nerd culture as a whole was niche back then, which makes kung fu nerds the niche of the niche, if you know what I'm saying. We should also note that the hype surrounding Shang-Chi goes way beyond the character of Shang-Chi himself. As cool as he is, I think there's a reason that this movie is coming out now and not 10 years ago. Culture is a result of historical trends after all, and make no mistake, we are witnessing a historical shift here. And even though some would assume that all the hype is due to the Marvel brand, which I don't blame them for assuming so, Marvel films have dominated the last decade of theater releases, which is also coincidentally the last decade of the normal theatrical experience as it was, but that's beside the point. But no, it's not because of the Marvel brand. Marvel has released a ton of stinkers and developed a ton of properties nobody cared about. Remember the Inhumans? No? Exactly. And studios always betray their fans in order to pander to what they think is the biggest market to make money. 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 And they throw their loyal fans under the bus whenever they think it'll benefit them. And fans know this, by the way, and they hate them for it. So why all the hype for Shang-Chi? If it's not because of the character, if it's not because of the fans, if it's not because of loyalty to the brand, then why Shang-Chi and why now? I warn you, my answer will be unorthodox and perhaps controversial, but I think it's the truth. It's because we're heading for an Asian century and the mainstream is being Asianized. Alright. Okay, let me explain. Strap in your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to discuss some heavy stuff here. I'd argue that the real interest behind this movie is generated from the tide of a changing cultural mainstream, as well as the new reality that this film represents, which we're all picking up on from a subconscious level. It's the feeling of the new world we may be entering this decade. You see, this movie is more culturally connected to the actual media young people in the West are consuming now. Beneath our feet, the center of the world has shifted, along with the kind of things young people watch. And Shang-Chi is merely the clearest manifestation of this. Alright, let me cut to the chase. By all accounts, we are basically heading into an Asian century. Asia is basically the new Europe, with all the good and all the bad that entails. Marvel being the main dominant force in Western cinema now, one which has been very popular in Asia, now depicting an Asian hero for the new decade, fits perfectly well with where the currents of history seems to be flowing to. Asian media is on the rise, as I've said before in the Game of Thrones video, whose link you can access in the description below if you want to, I don't know, give me some more views. But anyway, from K-pop and manga outselling their American entertainment counterparts worldwide, and Bollywood starting to seriously outcompete Hollywood, the USA is no longer the center of global culture. Even within the USA itself, young Americans don't even like consuming their own stuff anymore. And I'd wager this is one of the main reasons Marvel is doing a Shang-Chi movie. Not only to appeal to the Chinese market, which is the cliche answer, but even to their own anime, K-pop, K-drama, listening domestic market. By the way, China now has the biggest purchasing power parity in the world, larger than the USA's. They officially became the world's largest economy last year through the PPP measurement of an economy, and they're projected to overtake America in GDP in 2028.
You're not going to win the battle for the 21st century if you are a silly people. And Americans are a silly people. We're not losing to China. We lost. The returns just haven't all come in yet.
Yes, Bill, you're right. You're a douchebag who's wrong about almost everything, but you're right about this. So basically, Asian media has officially dominated the world, and Marvel was forced to cater to the new mainstream, and Shang-Chi is one of the closest things to anime in Marvel's pocket. Aside from Big Hero 6, which was already made into a movie, which further proves my point. And a lot of people my age in the West who grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s don't seem to understand what the younger folks are consuming these days, even in the West. When the West is not consuming Asian entertainment, they're emulating it. I mean, we also consumed this stuff when we were growing up, but the Zoomers are basically only consuming this stuff. And this new decade of Marvel and Disney movies in general is for them, and for this new world of Asian economic dominance, which we are officially living in. This depiction of Asians in the mainstream will only increase in volume and variety in the next few years in all probability. The only thing I can see stopping this would be a war in that continent involving nuclear weapons, but God forbid. And I'm not saying China will dominate the world, by the way. They're heading for a brutal demographic collapse soon, but the wealth they amassed will stay on that continent and other competing nations will grow there. And these other Asian nations are the ones that are dominating culturally, not China. I mean, even Mongolia produces more internationally influential musicians than China, for goodness sake. And China has like 1 billion and they still can't seem to produce influentially dominant musicians, while Mongolia has like what, 2,000? Anyway, I'm just kidding. China is just the current economic engine for Asia, which will then be helped out with the rise of India, further fueling the region's financial power for the foreseeable future. And you can even see what I'm talking about from space. You know how people use the satellite image to compare North and South Korea's different economic development? And they go, oh, wow, South Korea has more shiny lights, which means greater development. Also, screw North Korea. That regime kills innocent Christians all the time. Anyway, the last few years, places like India have grown brighter from space, while Europe, the origin of the industrial development phenomena in the first place, has actually grown dimmer as its population dies, unfortunately, which saddens me personally, since I am European myself, as well as Latin American, and it's painful to see this, but we made our choices. Individualism and less family values have resulted into what they have resulted in. But America is also going through a population decline, though less catastrophic. Their issues are more of social instability and economic stagnation. It will still be around as a great power, probably, but the cultural mainstream will be in Asia, and this is because of America's philosophy as a nation. America as a country tends to do anything for money and for the biggest market. They wage war, or threaten to wage war, just to open markets and whatnot. So they, or at least the largest American companies, will naturally submit to the largest market.
Who here thought they had permission to say anything critical of Chinese politics?
And this means cultural submission. They will cater to the Asian market to make money, which will be the largest market in the world. They already partially submit to Asia now, as Hollywood famously censors itself for the Chinese market, and this kind of cultural submission from the Americans to the Asian markets will only grow.
Crown Chimpoko Master, oh?
Buy all Chimpokomon and you will have happy feelings.
I have to become Royal Crown Chimpoko Master.
And when Asia fully rises, the American entertainment industry will lead the charge in catering to Asia and producing content for their cultures, further solidifying the soft power of Asian nations. And as I said, Asia will resemble Europe in its global influence, not the USA. It's not going to be like a mega power which controls everything militarily and sets up an international monetary system like the Americans have. And I'm also not saying that the Asians will colonize 87% of the world like the Europeans have. What I'm saying is, Asia will be a set of competing dominant nations who set the global standard that other regions look up to, and where people of other countries send their kids to study it, potentially. But being a continent of competing powerful states, things could get deadly and extremely unstable very fast, which means all this could change in the blink of an eye, and the only region left to dominate the world would be Latin America? Well, one can dream, I guess. But the point is, Asia is rising because the West is in decline.
But wait, why was the West in decline, Mr. Amateur YouTuber?
Well, I don't know. Why could it possibly be?
Well, we're the silly people now. 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 Well, we're the silly people now.
Shang-Chi is a step towards the new MCU, as it were, the herald of a new era, where Western companies make all their money in Asia, and so the West pays tribute to the East. And when for so long it was the other way around. Anime was absolutely drenched in European themes, but I suspect this decade they will start to focus more on Asia as well as back in Japan specifically, as I think Demon Slayer and its tremendous success, as well as other animes that seem to have more Japanese themes, indicate that they're looking more towards Asia. However, all this being said, I'm not making rash prophecies here. Asia might not rise to dominate the world. I mean, people have been saying that Brazil would be a giant for like 100 years, but we keep disappointing everybody. And with today's scientific knowledge and rapid technological growth, literally anything can happen this century, from runaway AI killing everybody to Planet of the Apes for some reason. I don't know why scientists do this, they just pull this stuff out of their asses, but it is what it is. My point is, the dominant force on this planet may not actually be just the usual human culture which influences everybody, but it might be something different. Who knows? But everything I said is indeed based on visible trends, and I think it does explain the trends we see in popular culture right now. And it's already dominated by the Asian market. America is not the largest economy in the world anymore by PPP standards, and it's no longer the cultural center. In a few years, America might no longer be such a hotspot for international university students. And in a few decades, America might not even be the greatest military power. Everything is indeed set up for Asia to become the new Europe of the century. And the most successful Western movie studios are doing their best to captivate an Asian audience, and this will further Asianize the mainstream. This is what Disney, doing yet another Eastern martial arts film movie, truly represents. Marvel is the face of the mainstream. It doesn't get more vanilla, more cookie cutter, more basic chick than Marvel. Gone are the days when kung fu movies or movies depicting Asia were a niche genre for a particular branch of Westerners who were curious about other cultures. It's not about being appealing to Westerners who like Asia anymore. It's about appealing to Asians. This is the culture now. With all this being said, I know what you're thinking. Does this mean that pretty Asian girl YouTubers will finally stop making a career from complaining about being oppressed by the West on the internet? I mean, I hope so. At some point, it's going to stop making sense pretty soon if current geopolitical trends keep going. Oh no, I'm oppressed by the West. It's like, ma'am, you're the dominant culture. Thank you very much. Anyway, and that's one thing I'm looking forward to in the Asian century. White guys won't be the bad guys in the zeitgeist anymore. We're not going to have bags of cash to be guilted out of, so that tactic will cease to be rewarding, and thus will fall out of style. The same way nobody cares about the brutality of the Portuguese Empire, even though it was the longest lasting European colonial power, because Portugal has no money to throw around, so nobody cares about shaming Portugal. Turns out grievance politics is just a way to get something out of rich white guys from the Anglosphere. Like how China calls the 19th century the century of humiliation because Europeans invaded them, but they're totally fine with Genghis Khan and the Mongolians who conquer them, even more thoroughly than the Europeans ever did, and for longer. And the Russians literally took large pieces of Chinese territory that they haven't given back. But it's okay, because China presses the Mongolians now, and China needs the Russians to fight off the Americans, so they don't care about that. But yeah, oh no, England, you're so evil because of the opium wars, now give me your money. By the way, you guys who thought the West was bad in terms of domination, hold on to your high horses, because here comes a power that didn't develop things like the Geneva Convention for its own cultural fabric, you know what I'm saying? You people will miss the good old days now, I'm telling you. However, back to my main point. This global trend explains the hype for the Shang-Chi movie more than anything else. He was the embodiment of a niche kung fu story which was popular for a while in the 1970s, but now he is pretty much the debut, or one of the debut. Am I saying that right? Debut? Anyway, he is one of the debut for the next decade of Marvel films, which means he could be the face of a new era of mainstream movies. Thank you for listening this long to my ramblings, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Peace.